Hi, and welcome to this edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health. Our mission here at Fresh Hope for Mental Health is to empower you to live well in spite of your mental health challenge by sharing insights through interviews, practical tools for living well, encouragement, and courage for overcoming all from a Christian perspective. And now, here's your host, Pastor Brad Hoefs.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to this edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health. I'm Brad Hoefs, your host. Our purpose here on Fresh Hope for Mental Health is to empower you to live a faith-filled, rich, and full life in spite of having a mental health diagnosis. Today, I have with me on the phone a good friend from San Antonio, Texas. I got to know him through speaking at a conference a year ago that he chairs. And his name is Doug Beach, and Doug is a member, I'm assuming, of the Bexar County Commissioner's Court and the Health Collaborative in that county, as well as he is the chairperson of NAMI FaithNet. And so I'd like to introduce all of you to Doug. Doug, it's great to have you today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to visit today, Brad.
Absolutely. There's a lot you are going to be able to share with our listeners. And first of all, I got to tell you, it was such a privilege a year ago and then just recently to again be in San Antonio at the conference Pathways to Hope. That's just been an incredible experience. And tell us about that conference, what it is. Tell the listeners, because you're bringing together a whole bunch of people from a whole bunch of different aspects of mental health. And to think that this is a citywide effort or county-wide effort is really amazing to me.
Well, it really grew out of, I'm also a member of NAMI and the board president for NAMI San Antonio. And I've been teaching NAMI classes along with my wife for 7 or 8 years. We lead a faith-based support group and have done that for about 8 years. And as I was more and more involved in mental health in our community and would go to meetings with different people from different parts of the mental health community, I noticed that too oftentimes we were meeting in silos. It was either professionals meeting together or law enforcement meeting together or, groups like that. And I didn't see everybody kind of meeting together in one room. And the other thing I didn't see was I very rarely saw people from the faith communities, leaders, involved in any of those meetings.
Absolutely.
Which was not good. And my wife and I both began teaching classes, NAMI classes at our church. And we lead our faith-based support group at our church. And so we were able to really build up a mental health ministry at our church over a period of years. And I just didn't see that happening at enough other places in the community. And we know that when people have a mental health issue, whether it's themselves or a family member, that more often than not, they go to see a pastor, priest, or rabbi before they go see anybody else.
Yeah.
So the whole premise is when you go to see somebody and if you go to see a faith leader or a clergy, and you don't get the right feedback or input, it can be devastating.
Yes.
We just found really a lack of support. So the purpose for the conference was twofold: to bring everybody into the same room from across the community. That's mental health providers, professionals, law enforcement, judiciaries, social agencies, faith leaders, peers, parents and family, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that really, I think, is probably the single most important thing we do. And then we were able to get the support of our county, Bexar County, and the county executive, who gave us the use of a brand new state-of-the-art $180 million performing arts center. So we have this fabulous facility.
Yeah, you do.
Great, some community support. And we drew about 11 to 1,200 people the first year. And in fact, this was just the third year, and we had 1,100 people during the day. And we also had another 500 youth at a youth event on Friday evening. So a total of almost 1,600 people, and it continues to grow. So the second part of why we did the conference was to equip people, to give them resources, and to hopefully activate and engage the faith community in San Antonio to become involved in helping provide support, to become more knowledgeable. So after the conference is over, our real work begins. We begin meeting with, going out to see churches throughout our community to offer our services and to follow up with them. And that's been the purpose of it. And I would say one other thing is we really went into this wanting to change the conversation about mental illness.
Yes.
We not only wanted to break the stigma, but we really wanted to make it okay to talk about it.
Absolutely.
And okay to look for help. And when you look for help, hopefully you get some good answers. So that's why the conference began. And I think by the third year, we've seen a change in the way people talk about mental health in our community. I've seen an enormous increase in interest by churches in, tell us more, we need to help too. We don't get very many turn downs. So it's been the biggest issue has been just getting out and talking to people and creating a greater level of awareness.
Right. And so you're seeing changes happen, especially with the faith community becoming more engaged then, huh?
Yes, definitely. And, it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is to create this greater level of awareness and visibility for the issue. And then you begin the dialogue. But we have people interested in helping today, and I think that's different than where we were several years ago.
Yeah. Now, do you have any other cities that have contacted you, for instance, across the country that you might help or at least kind of walk with them as they try to kind of do the same thing?
Well, we have, and I've met with some of them and talked to some of them on the phone, and we talk about kind of what does it take in your community to do something like this. And what I want to do is I think, want to be able to make this conference available to other cities throughout the country, and we're talking about how to do that, so that each community can have the benefit of having really national speakers, and we'll do the work on doing that part, and then we can make those speakers available either simulcast or through a video. We can make those speakers and that presentation available to people, and then they can do their own workshops, which tend to be more community focused and based.
Yeah.
So we're looking at how to spread this throughout the country.
That's wonderful. Now, let's say one of our listeners is interested in that. How would they go about contacting you, or what should they do if they're interested in at least finding out more or connecting with you?
Well, a couple ways. One, we have a website, pathwaystohope.net, and there's a button on there that lets you contact us and ask for information. Secondly, I can give you my email address, which is Doug Beach, Beach 7897 @gmail.com. So somebody can just send me an email and inquire. And I can give people my phone number, my cell number, which is 210-602-5733. And any or one of those is fine to be able to contact me. And I'm happy to visit with people and do it all the time and enjoy the opportunity.
Great. Yeah. Let me tell you, folks, for those of you who are listening, whether you have a diagnosis or you love somebody or you're a faith leader or maybe you're somebody that works in the mental health field, this model, what they're doing in San Antonio, is really phenomenal when you think about the fact that even people with the judicial system are there and they're interacting with one another, and the faith community and mental health care providers. And I've met some incredible people down there, and I've really enjoyed getting to know folks. This year, when I was there, they had Max Lucado's wife was one of the speakers. I forget her first name.
Dina.
Yeah, just having somebody like that tell their story about their journey with anxiety and things like that, it's very powerful, and it helps the faith community break the stigma for sure.
And then and I think the power of that too is when you hear that first person testimony, especially from somebody in a position like Danilyn is, as the wife of a pastor, it's often easy to sort of keep a low profile, keep your head down, and not let people know about your own mental health issues. That's why I really appreciated Danilyn's being at the conference because she and Max are both so well known in our community. But it's that old thing about, she in essence is giving other people permission to talk about their illness.
Absolutely.
Because she's opening up about hers.
Absolutely.
And she also was able to talk about how faith plays a role in her life and in her living with a mental health issue. So that's very powerful.
Absolutely. And of course, I was thrilled because I got to meet Max, and I told him he's part of one of my password when you have to answer questions. Who's your favorite author? Max Lucado. And he said, I wish I was my wife's favorite author. And then later she told me he was. So anyway, I appreciated meeting them. Now, tell me a little bit about your work with NAMI FaithNet, because you're the chairman of that committee, national committee, correct?
Right. Yeah, NAMI FaithNet began about 15 years ago. Gunnar Christensen from Southern California, Orange County, a NAMI member and a great person of faith, got half a dozen people together and talked to NAMI about the importance of faith in recovery and for families who are dealing with crises. And so we started that group, and NAMI FaithNet, and there's a web page. You can Google NAMI FaithNet, FaithNet, one word. You can Google that, and you'll get the NAMI FaithNet page. And we offer resources, a list of resources. We have a presentation that's a PowerPoint presentation that anybody can use called Bridges of Hope, and also a manual on reaching out to congregations and churches or to faith communities. And that both of those talk about how to develop a mental health ministry, how to reach out. And then secondly, the Bridges of Hope presentation is PowerPoint presentation that people can use to explain basic mental concepts about mental illness and what the role of the faith community can be in ministering to people both in the church, outside the church, neighbors, friends, family members. And so those are several of the things that NAMI FaithNet is doing, but we're trying to increase the visibility of the idea that faith is an important part of people's recovery. I believe, and I think NAMI believes, and the literature would tell you that treating mental health as a holistic concept, body, mind, and spirit, is the best way for people to live a full and healthy life and to live in recovery. So, and if you take one of those elements out, it doesn't work as well.
Right.
In fact, I found it's hard for people to get to recovery if they don't, treat all three elements, body, mind, and spirit. So I often encourage people that when I do NAMI talks in the NAMI classes that, not everybody has a faith. But if you do, you should use that to your benefit and to your own wellness.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about what NAMI FaithNet does, but I have been enormously encouraged at the National Convention when we meet, and I get a chance to meet people from all over the country. NAMI has over 750 affiliates, and what has really impressed me has been the great amount of diverse work being done all over the country on affiliates working with their own faith communities. I mean, it's been really impressive and encouraging. This is all grassroots. So, and we want to encourage that, and we're trying to build up a better network within NAMI of people who are involved in faith-based programs.
Yeah. Well, and the wonderful thing is that NAMI's been around for a long time, and they've got some incredible classes and materials also, like the family to family, which you said you've taught, right? Or you teach
Right,
presently.
I have taught it.
Yeah. And that I've heard nothing but rave reviews about that every time I turn around. What if somebody lives in a community and they don't have Fresh Hope? They have a NAMI group. Now, some NAMI groups are FaithNet groups and others are not, or how does that work?
Well, that's basically kind of it. I mean, for example, if you want to start a faith-based support group, and I use a lot of the Mental Health Grace Alliance material,
Mm-hmm.
the Family Grace materials for families. They also have Living Grace materials for people living with a diagnosis, and of course, your materials on Fresh Hope. So what we try to do through FaithNet is make people aware of those materials, and that if they want to use them, we direct them to places where they can either get trained on the materials and how to use them, which is the best thing to do. But if for example, an affiliate does not, there are some people who don't want to go to a faith-based group.
Sure.
So NAMI has support group materials for groups like that, and they can meet lots of places, VA hospitals, in the community, and lots of places that maybe faith-based materials aren't as
accepted.
Thank you for the word. So you have to do both.
Right.
In the end, our interest is in helping people, and the support groups are one of the best vehicles for helping people keep on keeping on and getting better.
Yes, yeah. Well, and I just know this. You and I were part of a meeting recently in the Washington, D.C. area in which really they brought together a group of people to really start talking about how to bridge the connection between mental health care providers and the faith community and things like that. I just know this, that the research shows that when faith is part of somebody's recovery, when it's incorporated into their recovery, they get better faster and they stay better longer. And
I think you're right. And one thing I'll say as a NAMI family-to-family instructor, there's a question it's a 12-week class, and in one of the classes we asked the class question, how do you get through the week? Most families come to us in crisis.
yes,
And in serious crisis. And they are absolutely, they're in the ditch.
yep,
So we do what I call triage with the class. We help stop the bleeding. We help them get back on their feet, and we help give them an orientation and information that is going to help them help their family member and help manage these illnesses.
Yep.
So when we ask the question, how do you get through the week? 90% of the people in our classes say, well, if it weren't for my faith, I couldn't do it.
yes,
So we don't, and it's funny because we don't necessarily introduce the concept of faith in that class. We let people express their faith and how faith is an important part.
Right.
And the discussion then that goes on in the classroom is, you just stand back and let it happen.
right,
And it is so, it's so great because you see people encouraging each other. And that's a lot of what then our faith-based support groups do is we had our meeting, we meet twice a month. We had one last night, and the kind of wisdom that you hear from people who have great deep faith, the kind of wisdom you hear is amazing.
yes, yeah.
And we all get lifted up by it.
Yep. And that's kind of what we do in Fresh Hope is that we don't teach people faith things. We're talking about mental health, but we say that we're faith-based and Christ-centered so that nobody's surprised when somebody talks about that.
Right.
But at the same time, there are many times where we have people that have no faith and they still find that helpful. It's amazing how it really does lift other people up, and people are able to lift each other up. And I think that comes from the whole idea of infusing hope for the future in with faith, or infusing it with faith, when it's hope informed by faith, if you will, or something like that, knowing you've got a future and God can take it and make it work for good, is very helpful.
Well, the hope is what keeps people going. And I tell people in our classes, so oftentimes people have had a hard time finding services. They've been disappointed by the way that, by the criminal justice system. They've been disappointed by the healthcare system. And it's just real easy to get down.
Yep.
And to feel so, to expect the next shoe to drop and that things aren't going to get better.
Well, and many times, go ahead.
What hope does is it helps you lift up your head, look up, and to begin to appreciate. And we also ask people to think about the things that they're grateful for. And, a lot of people come to the class thinking, what do you mean? What am I grateful for? My son's in jail, and I had this terrible situation. But as we begin to talk about it, we begin to see a lot of times the small things, the places for which we can be grateful, the things for which we can be grateful.
Right.
And so it becomes a new approach, and the hope is part of that. One other thing, Brad, I'll say that so many people who are in the middle of trying to help a family member or in the middle of their own illness, they have not necessarily been welcomed or treated well by faith communities.
Exactly.
So they come and, so when you want to preach about faith, you have to really be honest about what has the faith community done in many cases.
Yep. So
we encourage people where they are. We encourage people in their faith, but you know what? If they're struggling with it, it's pretty understandable.
Sure, absolutely. Yep. And, I've many times thought about this. I haven't done it yet. And depending on when people listen to this podcast, I may have done it by the time they hear it. But I honestly believe that some of us in the church at large, we've got to stand up and confess the sins of the faith community against those with mental illnesses, where people have been harmed and hurt and judged by making it out to be nothing more than a spiritual issue. Pray more, do this more, you need to trust Jesus, et cetera, because those things are harmful. When your brain chemistry is not working right, you're not going to be in your right mind or your right faith, And there's just been a lot of harm done over the years, I believe.
So we're trying to be we're trying to walk alongside people. We're trying to companion them. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to help. And I think that in and of itself, being there to help and to listen to people and to be empathetic is, in some ways, is the beginning of a journey for a lot of families kind of back to a place of faith.
Yep.
If you experience the grace of God through somebody, it gives you a glimpse, I think, of a greater power.
Yep.
So it's all together, and as you say, we don't sit there and we do reference scripture, but we're not there to
preach or teach.
Yeah, we're there to listen.
Yeah.
And to be empathetic. And we think, one of the most important things we learn in our NAMI classes and in our support groups is how to listen and how to be empathetic.
Yep. And really, that's the most honoring thing and respectful thing we can do for one another, is to really listen, to understand, and to have empathy for each other, because the journey never looks exactly the same for everybody. If you're the person with a diagnosis or you're the person who loves somebody with a diagnosis. Let me just kind of ask you this question. You're passionate. Sure. You're passionate about all of these things, and certainly there's a reason you are. Would you mind kind of going into a little bit of your story and your journey with mental health stuff? Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say I'd be happy to. I'm glad to.
Yeah,
But
right.
I have an adult son who's now 41, who in his actually probably sometime during his college years, we began to see kind of strange behavior. We didn't know how to explain it. After college, he had a severe break and became so depressed he really just could not hardly function at times. Again, we didn't know what it was. And then he left our home, left San Antonio. We didn't know where he was. He left for several years. And during that time, we began to do a lot of investigation, talking to psychiatrists about what had gone on with him and his behavior. And we started getting a diagnosis of mental illness.
Mm,
And it was a shock to us.
sure.
A friend of ours said, "Do you know about NAMI?" And we said, "No." And we looked it up, and my wife went down the next day and enrolled in a NAMI family class. And it was really the first time that we had read or heard anything that kind of made sense. It was also one of the first times we had heard the concepts of recovery and hope. And, for
Right.
us, we were desperate for hope. So as we took the classes, we both took the classes, we both then we took the teacher training classes, we began teaching classes.
Mm-hmm.
Then we began leading a faith-based support group because it was important to us. And it was a way, as we reached out to other people, it was a way for us to begin to heal too.
Sure.
And the more stories you hear, and I think probably many of the people listening to the podcast will agree, you always think, oh man, my situation is just terrible. I have this, and you think that, and then you
Mm-hmm.
start listening to other people's stories, and you realize, oh wow, it could be a lot worse.
Yeah.
And I think you begin at that point, you begin to become empathetic. You begin to be a better listener. And you begin to do something that we teach in the NAMI classes, and that is to see the person and not the illness, not the
Yes.
signs and the symptoms. So I think that as we ventured into this territory, and there aren't many people that just, say, hey, I want to work with people who have mental illness.
Right.
It's a tough area to work in.
Yep.
But I think what we found was we were fed, and I mean, we walked away after each class, after each support group meeting, feeling good, not
Mm-hmm.
about the situations that we heard about, but we felt good about the people that were there. And I found that people who have some of the most difficult life circumstances were some of the most compassionate, caring people that I had known.
Yep.
Now, how does that work? How do people who have the greatest burdens end up being people who can be compassionate and caring and giving when they don't, when they're struggling in their own life to make things whole?
Yep.
So that's one of the reasons why, it grew out of my son's experience. Just to do a postscript on that, he did return. He went through years of kind of bumping up against the edges of life.
Mm-hmm.
It was never easy. And then about a year and a half ago, he found a job online, and he really had a tough time getting a job. Found a job online teaching English as a second language.
Oh.
And it was exactly what he wanted to do. So he's
Sure.
now living abroad, teaching English as a second language, doing extremely well. And the moral of the story is when somebody finds their passion, what they enjoy doing, and they have been given the opportunity, they get better. They do well.
Yes. Yeah. They have purpose.
They have purpose. So he's doing the best that he's done in years and years. He wrote us a couple weeks ago from abroad, and he said, I am so lucky I found this job. I feel I love what I'm doing. I couldn't be happier. Well,
In the deepest part of the pain, you probably thought you'd never hear that.
I think yes. in the deepest part and for many years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that, part of the reason I want to say that is because we've been doing this for well over 20 years. And what I see and what we see with many families is I have to, I tell them, don't be discouraged. Stay in the game. Don't give up. Keep learning about mental illness. Keep learning about what you can do to help support your family member. But don't give up. And things do get better.
Right.
So I have the benefit of having worked with many families, hundreds now at this point, and I can see in case after case after case after case where they do this, where they get educated, they learn how to support their family member, they don't give up. Things most of the time, and I would say 80 to 90% of the time, get better.
Yeah.
We have cases where our families have lost somebody to suicide.
Right.
Those are some of the hardest things we have to deal with. It's not easy, but anyway, that's a word of hope for families.
Absolutely, and I love it that you're speaking that to those who are listening that have loved ones, because if you hear what Doug's saying, he's saying, don't give up, hang in there, keep going, and find strength from other people who are experiencing it. Going to a support group where you can be supported and encouraged by others is extremely empowering in and of itself. Really. And,
very.
Yep. And it's so powerful that that's one of the things you need to do for yourself.
You have to take care of yourself.
Absolutely. It's why in an airplane they tell you, if you're traveling with a small child, put your own oxygen mask on first.
Right.
Yeah. Well, do you have any other words of encouragement that you might want to offer to those who are struggling either themselves or they have a family member who is struggling?
Well, I think for people who are living with an illness, and I'm not saying anything that probably most people don't know, but I think that being in community is one of the most healing and helpful things that you can do. And what I mean by that is not becoming isolated.
Yep.
And when you find somebody who is empathetic and listens well, and you can associate with them, and you can find opportunities to socialize, to be in community, and that's a big step towards becoming more healthy.
Yep.
For families, I think one of the key lessons, you've mentioned it, there's so many times where you just want to throw in the towel. You say, why did this happen to my family member? This is way more than I signed up for. Where is God in all this?
All right.
Why did you do this to me, God? And people ask those questions, and very understandably so. But I think that when we were probably at the deepest point of our not knowing where our son was, not knowing if he was dead or alive, and having to look around the world for him, it actually became the point where our faith grew the strongest.
Sure.
Because as we prayed every day, and sometimes we didn't even know how to pray or what to pray for. But time and again, we found our prayers were answered. And it was a point where, again, our faith grew stronger than at any other point, and gave us the strength to keep going on.
Sure.
When our son did return, I think we were better equipped. And our faith, I think, gave us a sense of calmness, that our son was loved, and that he was a child of God, and we're there to help.
Yep.
So it kind of helps put your own role in perspective. If you have a faith and you believe in God, it is enormously helpful.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much, Doug, for being with us in this episode. Would you mind closing us out with a word of prayer?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Lord, thank you for Brad and for his ministry and for all that he's done to help others through Fresh Hope and through his own life. And Lord, he is a testimony to faithfulness, and the people who have surrounded him have done so well. And Brad has been willing to share this with all of us around the country, and it has lifted us up. And I pray for everybody listening that you won't give up hope, that you'll help find that this will help strengthen your faith, and that you will help support your own family members. And for those who are living with illness, you're not alone. You're loved. Amen.
Amen. Well, again, thank you so much, Doug, for being our guest today on this edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health. Well, my friend, we thank you for listening to this edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health, and we know that, and we hope that it's been helpful for you. We'd really like to hear from you. You can email your comments, questions, or insights to us, and we'll answer them, or we'll talk about them on the program. And we'll share your comments and insights as well. So you can email us at info@freshhope.us or Pastor Brad at freshhope.us. And you can connect with us on Facebook and Twitter and all the social media places, as well as you can find videos about Fresh Hope on YouTube and on Vimeo. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, would you please take just a few minutes and write an honest review of the podcast? It just helps others be able to find us out there in amongst all the options that people have. We have books, we have groups, there's all kinds of information on our website at www.freshhope.us, freshhope.us, and be sure to tell your friends about our program. And we pray that God's richest blessings on your ministry, Doug, and what you do with NAMI FaithNet, as well as the Pathways to Hope Conference in San Antonio. Would you mind giving us the websites for those few things once again?
Sure. The Pathways to Hope website is pathwaystohope.net. And sometimes it'll come up when you Google that. It'll just come up San Antonio Mental Health Conference, and click on that. And then the other one you wanted, Brad, was?
The Faith Net.
Oh, NAMI, yeah. Just Google NAMI FaithNet. And you'll get a page that comes up, and it will take you to the NAMI FaithNet page, listing of resources and contact information.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, until the next time, may the Lord fill you with His hope, fresh and new daily. I'm Brad Hoefs, and this has been another edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health.
You've been listening to Fresh Hope for Mental Health. If you have an opportunity, please review, share, and subscribe to the Fresh Hope for Mental Health podcast on iTunes or on the service that you use. We encourage you to share our podcast on social media with your friends and family. Previous podcasts of Fresh Hope for Mental Health can be found at freshhopeformentalhealth.com, iHeartRadio, Stitcher Radio, and iTunes. The Fresh Hope for Mental Health podcast is part of Fresh Hope. Fresh Hope is an international network of Christian mental health peer support groups which empower people to live well in spite of having a mental health diagnosis. For more information about Fresh Hope, go to freshhope.us. Fresh Hope is one of the leading networks of faith-based peer support groups internationally. Our host, Brad Hoefs, is founder and president of Fresh Hope. He is a pastor who is living well in spite of having bipolar disorder. Brad is the author of the book Fresh Hope for Living Well, which is available at Amazon.com. Brad is also a speaker, blogger, hope coach, and mental health advocate. You can find more out about Brad by going to bradhoefs.com. Hoefs is spelled Hoefs. If you or someone you know is interested in attending a Fresh Hope group meeting, go to freshhope.us and click on Find a Group. Not only do we have local groups, but we also offer Fresh Hope groups online also. If you're interested in starting a Fresh Hope group in your community, email us at info@freshhope.us.